Hi there, Jonathan here. The following talk is offered freely to ensure that no one is ever denied access to these practices and to these teachings. If you feel inspired to make a donation to support this offering, you can go to my website where you can also sign up for a monthly newsletter designed to support you in your practice. That's at www.jonathanfoust.com. Thank you and enjoy. One of my favorite cartoons from the New Yorker is this image of these two older guys wearing shabby clothes and, stubble on their face and kind of sharing a bottle and a brown paper bag, just sitting by the side of the road. And one of these old guys is saying to the other, I had it all. My own company, a house in New York, a house in Switzerland, my own plane. And then I switched to decaf. So this talk is about energy. How to manage your energy. It's not so much about just having strong energy and strong determination. It's about skillful means. Another story, which I know I've shared here before, but again, it's one of my favorites. This man goes to an ashram, and the man running the ashram is supposed to be very, very well known for being able to look in your eyes and tell you when you'd be enlightened. And so he says, I want to live in your ashram. How long will it take me to get enlightened? And the guru looks in his eyes really carefully. And he says, 10 years. And the fellow says, what if I take everything you tell me to do and I double down on it? And the teacher looks in his eyes again. 20 years. So the guy erupts and says, what kind of an insane person are you? And the guru says, for you, 30 years. So it's how you manage your energy, how you manage your time and this finite time you have here on this plane. The word in Pali is virya. And virya is actually related, the root of the word is related to virility. So it's that fundamental aliveness. In Sanskrit, the word is vira, and one of the translations is hero. So it's sort of that heroic energy. It's kind of the courage, the zeal you have for life. It's kind of the opposite of defeatism. We talk a lot about sloth and torpor, the heaviness, the density we experience at different times. It's the opposite of that. So how do you cultivate the energy and the courage and the vitality to do what needs to be done in your life? So this is part of the 10 perfections. And again, the 10 perfections can be seen as these qualities that you can cultivate. And as you polish these qualities in yourself, they're like the facets of a gem that come really alive. The very first one is generosity. Cultivating a quality of generosity toward yourself and toward others. The second has to do with morality. And that is where you are living your life that's aligned with your values. And again, for yourself, but also being someone who's for moral justice, for a moral culture as well. It's not just internal, it's external. The third has to do with simplicity. It has to do with living a life where you're not engaging with what doesn't serve you. So from that place of simplicity, you see more clearly. And that leads right into cultivating wisdom and insight. And again, when you cultivate wisdom, you're seeing what's true. You're seeing through your own story, your preferences, your embellishments, to come in contact with what's true. So energy and vitality are a very important part of this practice. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the reality of the finite time you have here in this life. And to talk about how to manage the energy and the conditions that are available to you in this life. How to evaluate how you're living your life so it's more in alignment with what you most want. And how to build momentum in your practice and in your life so that your energy gives you more energy. It must be about 20 years ago now, I was going for a walk in the summer with a good friend of mine. And I was walking barefoot in the mountains of western Massachusetts, and I stepped on a bee. And so I just stopped and I, kind of pulled out the stinger, and my friend said, "Are you okay?" I said, No, I'm fine. So we walked on for maybe another mile or so. And then I noticed I was feeling a little flushed, kind of a little hard to breathe. And someone saw me and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I think I'm fine. I'm just going to head back and cool off," because I was feeling more and more flushed. But thank God this person said, "No, let me give you a ride back." I don't even know who that person was, but I'm really grateful because I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for them. So she gave me a ride back, and another person saw me and said, "Something's wrong." And by then I noticed I was feeling really flushed. And a friend of mine who had been a medic in Vietnam saw me and said, "Get in the car right now." And I was going into anaphylactic shock from the bee sting. And over the course of this drive to the hospital, I began to watch my consciousness shift in a pretty profound way. My sense of time and space got very distorted. One moment in particular, I remember, as we're driving through this small city, I remember seeing this woman standing on a street corner, and she was in slow motion. She was lifting her hand up to clear some hair out of her eye. And so I saw that slow motion movement, and I looked over at the speedometer, and we were going 90 miles an hour. And then faces started falling away, and I remember at one point I thought, "Oh, this is early graduation, I guess." And I remember thinking, "Oh, maybe I should do my mantra." And so I started doing my mantra, and then the pain started getting really bad, and I thought, "No, screw the mantra." By the time by the time we got to the hospital, I had pretty much lost consciousness. I remember being dragged in. And the next thing I remember was my awareness on the ceiling, watching 6 people working on me. And I remember exactly what they were calling out, the IVs wide open and so forth. And I remember thinking, there's no way they're bringing that body back unless it's God's will. I remember having that lucid thought. And then suddenly it was like I fell from the ceiling onto the table. And then I heard the doctor's voice in my ear saying, "He's back." So I was revived. And what was interesting was how from kind of the time that I was stung by the bee to the time I was back at my desk working was about 3 hours. And I just tried to I'm through that. That's over. But then I noticed a real depression coming in. Like nothing really seemed to mean anything. And along with that was a really deep impatience. There were things I noticed that I used to enjoy that I thought, I don't have time for this. This is not This is not a helpful thing. Being in idle conversation would make me really impatient. And I realized later that it's not uncommon for people who have near-death experiences to have kind of a hurry-up quality to their life. Because there's this very profound realization that the time you have here is quite unreliable. You know, for me to be going for a walk on a beautiful summer day and 2 hours later to be revived on a table, it happens like that. And it really brings up the question that I think every one of us needs to ask ourselves, which is, knowing that you're going to die, how do you want to live? And the Buddha said, in effect, your house is on fire. This body is limited. Your time here is limited. And so, if you have limited time, what do you really want while you're here? So what that sort of brings up is, okay, what's the roadmap to navigating one of these temporary flesh units? You know, what are the best practices if you want to be more awake in your life? You know, it seems like every talk I give recently, I'm reminding you that you're going to die. Sorry about that. But it's also an invitation to ask yourself what's most important. So you have limited time. And then you're born in this life with certain causes and conditions. Certain assets available to you, certain liabilities. You know, the Buddha said you are the inheritor of your karma. That is to say, you are the inheritor of the causes and conditions of your life. Whatever your social status is, whatever the character structure of your parents were, your best friends, all those conditions have affected who you are. The corollary to that is you are the creator of your karma. That you can create different causes and conditions through conscious choice. So the next question is not just how you manage your time, but how you manage your energy. So for the last 7 weeks, the Potomac has been in flood stage. And my favorite thing in the world is to get up before sunrise and get out there and meet the sun and everything else that's out there. So it's just below flood stage today. So I got out there this morning, and it's really still high volume. You know, the waters are really muddy, and it's kind of a high risk thing to go out there in the darkness, especially with an expensive camera on my paddleboard. But I really wanted to go upriver and go around an island and kind of visit the eagles, which is part of my daily tradition. And so I had to ask myself, do I have the energy? Do I have the fuel to actually get out on this pretty intense river? So to support me, I had a protein drink, and I had a big thing of matcha tea. So protein powder, chocolate, and caffeine. That helped. But then I had to be very strategic, because I couldn't just paddle right up the middle of the river. It was just, there's no way I could do that. So, you know, there were times I had to kind of aim for certain rocks and pause in certain eddies. But then there were times where I didn't have any choice. I just had to gut it out and paddle like crazy for the next point where I could take a rest. And that's kind of what life is like. You have a goal, you have goals in your life, and you have to very strategically decide when you go for it and when you have to rest. You have to very carefully manage your energy. I had mentioned before someone by the name of Joe Dominguez who wrote a book called Your Money or Your Life. And he's got a very, very interesting take where he has you think of your life in terms of life energy units. And one of the exercises he has you do is you take the salary that you earn, and then you take the hours you actually work, plus the hours that you commute, plus the hours that you worry about your work, plus the hours that you're sick because of the stress, plus the cost of your costume, plus the cost of transportation. Average all that out, and then figure out how much you make an hour. And that's your life energy unit. It's a fascinating process to go through. A friend of mine did this a while back, and he said it completely changed how he did things. You know, he would normally just go out for drinks and dinner. He would then ask himself, is this worth 3 life energy units? It's something to reflect on. How can you be wise and strategic in the ways that you manage and invest your life energy units? So as we were kind of shaking our hands out earlier, you could probably feel that primal energy, that pulsing energy, you know, that life force of prana or chi or ki or Holy Spirit, Holy Presence, whatever you may call it. Like, that's what animates you. And managing that energy is very, very important. To really look at your physical health, the quality of your sleep, the quality of your diet, how that affects your energy level, the right strategic use of exercise so that you're optimal in your health, but also evaluating your emotional health, the harmony in your home, the quality of intimacy, the quality of meaning that you have in your life. These are all important elements that are either going to have 3 outcomes. Anything you do is going to only have one of 3 outcomes. You are either going to gain energy from it, it's going to give you energy, or it's going to drain you in some way, or it'll be neutral. And every now and then I like to just think about that with food. You know, whatever I'm going to consider to eat, you know, to look at it and ask, am I going to get energy from this? Is it going to deplete me in some way, or will it be neutral? And then, of course, there's a question of how much of each one. So this managing energy and vitality is something that's really primal to practice. Buddhism is filled with these lists, but another list is called the 7 factors of awakening. Like, what are the 7 qualities that have to be present for you to be fully awake? One of them is mindfulness. That's non-judging awareness. One of them is investigation. That's the willingness to really look and examine what's here. One of them is joy or rapture, the willing to be absorbed in what's there. You have to be relaxed in order to be awake, but you also have to be concentrated to be awake. And you have to have a quality of equanimity, a quality of spacious presence. And you have to have energy. Energy is a requirement. It's a very helpful thing to reflect on. Like, I've noticed as I've kind of explored this, I've noticed how many times in my life when I'm either in some subtle form of depression or feeling really, really negative, that I didn't sleep the night before. And I've kind of gotten to this place of like, when I'm tired, I've made a decision not to believe anything my mind tells me. It's been really helpful. There are a lot of other conditions I shouldn't do that either, but that's a really helpful one. You know how it is with little kids when they need a nap. You know their life will be so different after they nap, but they're not going to nap. That's us. We really need to address this. It's so primal to our core happiness, but it's also so primal as to living a really satisfying life at the same time. So this practice of becoming more awake, cultivating non-judging awareness in your life, is classically described as swimming upstream. You're swimming against your own conditioning, but you're also swimming against the whole culture if you really want to be awake and cultivate non-judging awareness. So that's where the energy comes in. And to really look at what it means to be fully alive. And what that means is, what is your life when it's not impinged by fear? What is life like when you're not confused? What is life like when you're content? You're not wanting anything different than how it is. So the classic teachings say that as you develop energy, once you've got a little surfeit of energy, there are three things that you do. The first is you focus on developing your own character. That is to say, you look at how you're living your life, how you can align your life with your values, how you can increase your capacity for joy and happiness and kindness. And part of the next thing then is to develop your practice. What are the practices? What are the ways you live your life that are an extension of your happiness? And the third is your practice then is for the development of others. So basically, fill your cup. Figure out how to keep your cup full. And then from a full cup, be present in your life for those around you. The analogy I come back to again and again is the phrase of "my cup runneth over." Those are the times in your life when you're feeling so good you can't not be nice. When you started a conversation with a stranger or wave someone across the street, you're so full, you're just overflowing. So when people say to me, boy, that meditation and yoga stuff, that's so narcissistic. It can be, but my personal sense is that filling your cup to overflowing is your responsibility. And that requires some brutal honesty to really look at what drains you. What could you change so you weren't drained? What gives you energy? What fills you up? Because when your cup is full and overflowing, life looks very, very different. So again, a lot of these teachings around the 10 perfections come back to the question of what do you want? What's most important in your life? What are your goals? And how do you assess where you are in relationship to your goals? And then, what are the practices that are going to support you? So I like to think of mindfulness as non-judging awareness. And one of my goals is to cultivate my capacity to see clearly without judgment. One of my uber goals, as I've shared before, is to be happy no matter what the circumstances. that would be pretty amazing. And that's really kind of considered the flower of the practice, to have a quality of steadiness no matter what is happening internally or externally. So then the questions are, what are the practices that work for you? And this is really such an important question, because there is no one-fits-all practice here. There are lots of traditions that will tell you what to do and how to do it and for how long. But ultimately, it's for you to really figure that out. There's a story I heard last week. Last week I was at a teacher training through the Awareness Training Institute with Sounds True. My wife and Jack Cornfield are leading it, and I was leading some mindful movement and doing some components for it. And Jack told this great story about practice. And he read it. It was really, really nice. I didn't get the reading, so I'm regurgitating it here for you. But it's the story of a guy who was with his wife was giving birth in the hospital. And so they had to fill out these forms, and he was an artist. And the doctor, before the birth, came out just to meet him and so forth. They said, by the way, I went over your forms. I see you're an artist. He said, I feel like I really missed my calling. I love playing the piano, and I regret that I didn't become, a concert pianist. That was really my dream, but instead I went into this profession. So they talked about that a little bit. Then later, after the birth, the doctor came out to talk with him again. And someone who was attending, one of the other doctors who was attending the process, interrupted them and said to the doctor, and said, I just want you to know the work you did in there was brilliant. And I would be honored to work with you anytime. And then he left. So this fellow, the artist, said, well, it sounds like you're pretty good at this. You must bring a level of artistry to this. And the doctor said, yeah, it was pretty hairy in there, but I knew what to do, and it really worked out beautifully. He said, but I can tell you why it went well. And this guy said, why? He said, because I played 2 hours of Chopin this morning. That's his practice. And I think it's important for each of us to really locate what is it that lights you up? What is it that helps you to pause and be fully present? For some of us, it may be taking time to reflect on what you're grateful for, to take time to pause and be present in the senses. For others, it may be doing more physical yoga. For others, it may be working out. For others, it may be being outside. But it's a very deep and intimate question. What helps you connect? And to what degree? So as I was paddling up the river, I stopped to hang out at the eagle nest. And there was one lone eagle who's now an adolescent. And it's not quite ready to fly, but it's standing on the nest and flapping its wings a lot, and it's hopping around on the tree. So it was, when I saw it the day before, it had kind of like hopped onto a branch above the nest, and it was kind of swaying back and forth. And I didn't see it. It was kind of early and really overcast. So I paddled up and came around the east side of the island where the morning light is usually on the back of the nest. And as I was floating by, I saw this big brown bird about 2 trees away, but really far down in the tree. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe that's the adolescent. And so I actually paddled back up a couple times, so I couldn't get much of a glimpse of it, but it was kind of a large brown bird. And I started to feel kind of sick, what if it was injured? What if it had tried to fly and had fallen? But I realized that, when a bird takes off for the first time, it's not a Disneyland experience. It's not like the orchestra swells and it's one flap of the wings and it's on to its new life. But it's very much this stop and start thing. And so this life force is sort of like pushing this adolescent eagle to its limits. It's hopping, it's jumping, it's trying to fly. And if that was it, it had its own experience. But if it survives, it's getting stronger. And how many times have we been in those situations where we really had to test ourselves? And how many times have you, when you really, really wanted something, had to really reach down deep and really gut it out? That's also part of growth. In his training last week, Jack was talking about how if there are any adolescent males around, the question is there anything dangerous to do around here? And I cringe at all the crazy stuff I've done in my life, and paddling and climbing and hiking. But again, I think for all of us, when you really want something, you go to an edge and you dig deep. There's a wonderful book out there called Anti-Fragile that talks about how it's the edges where we grow. When you really want something, you have to pay a price for it. And it's that edge that brings you alive. And the question is, what are the edges in your life if you want to be more awake? If you want to be happier in your life? What are the edges you need to come up against? What are you willing to give up in order to open to that? So building energy and striving is a really wonderful thing, but it's got a massive shadow to it. And the massive shadow is, if you have lots of energy, but you don't have direction, you can go down a lot of rabbit holes in your life. Energy with no awareness means you can be chasing a lot of things for the wrong reasons. And so many of us are caught in striving. What we're striving for is to be successful, to seek praise, to avoid pain. Or we're striving to avoid pain and to avoid failure and to avoid shame. So part of spiritual maturity is about first identifying what you really want, and then looking at how you can very economically and strategically move toward that. If you don't know what you want, you will be in constant reaction in life. You'll be in a pinball machine, bouncing from one thing to the next. And the key seems to be slowing down. Just like in meditation practice, where you wake up in this crazy thinking mind and you reboot, you re-relax. You bring your attention to one point in the senses in the here and now. You kind of ride that, you bring presence. And then you establish that sense of the observer, of non-judging awareness, and you begin to sense the flow of your life. That's what we need to do again and again and again in our lives. And that's why the practice supports us in so many intangible ways. The power of pausing and slowing down. You cannot measure the impact that it can have in your life. I have a whole other chunk of this talk, and I'm not going to have time for it. But maybe I'll speak just briefly to what it's like when you're caught in a vicious cycle. You know what it's like, those vicious cycles? Like someone says something, you react the same way, they react the same way to you, and you're having the same fight you've had over and over and over again. And the question becomes, how is it that you can shift that vicious cycle into what my friend Pat Coffey calls a virtuous cycle? Just to share a little story before we close with a meditation. When I lived in West Africa, I was overwhelmed by the poverty. I was living in the capital city of Niger, in Niamey. So everywhere I went, there were just people, wanting cadeau, a gift. And I just sort of lived in a perpetual cringe for a while. But when I had to ride my little motorcycle to a particular place, there would be these old beggars who would always say, "I'll guard your motorcycle for you. Make sure nothing bad happens." And I would always have this sort of a tight cringe around it. And then I read this beautiful, beautiful thing. I believe it was by Ram Dass, who said, if you really want to be awake in this life, imagine that you could take a lifetime where you were simply the observer of everything, where you received no ego gratification whatsoever, and yet you could practice cultivating non-judging awareness. He said, and that's what a lot of beggars seem to have a quality. If you look really closely, they seem to have a quality of wisdom and a quality of equanimity about them. I was so struck by that. And the next time I parked my motorcycle and these old guys are saying, "Hey, well, watch your motorcycle for you," rather than cringing, I just sat down with them. And we didn't have much language. They had sort of pidgin French, and I had pidgin in their language. But it was this sense of their presence that I found myself, every time I had to go and park my motorcycle, it was like visiting these wise friends. It was such a powerful moment of seeing my reactivity, which just set up this vicious cycle, and looking closely at my part and how I could bring more awareness to it, that opened up possibilities where they didn't exist before. So it went from constrict and tight energy to a real feeling of connection and a little bit of the mystery. So it can be helpful to reflect, as you reflect on the elements of your life, the pieces of your life that give you energy, where you feel lit up, you feel expanded. And to look at the parts of your life that are draining. And to look at how you can bring more attention to that. Is there something that might need to change internally in your attitude? Or maybe it's time for an external change. What might the effect of that be? Why don't we close with a short meditation? I've got a little reading to share with you. And this speaks a little bit to exploring how you can navigate your life in a way where you can have more vitality and energy flowing through it. This is called Autobiography in 5 short chapters. Chapter 1. I walk down the street, and there is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I am in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are wide open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. So in these final moments, you might let your eyes close. Notice where you feel the breath on the inside right now. Feel the sounds around you and this quality of presence. In your own way, reflecting on this miracle of this life. No timetable as to how long you have. And asking, what is most important in this life? What would you need that would bring you into a greater sense of aliveness, vitality, and joy? As you're ready, you can deepen the breath. And when you're ready, you can open the eyes. Thank you for your kind attention. Manage to say it again, you're going to die. But until then, let's have some fun. A couple quick announcements. First of all, there is a group, a Ramadan group that are coming in. They're going to be having their evening meal. And we do have tea and cookies, but they're downstairs. So if you'd like to have some tea, have a cookie or two, kind of connect with some others, that'll be happening there. There's also a discussion group happening here as well in a few minutes. Going to be right over there. It's a great way to connect with others. And just a reminder, there's awesome yoga happening before, so you can check that out. There's also the Dharma Book Club that's going to be meeting next week. As always, thank you for your support that supports the church and me in my life. And if you'd like to be on the mailing list, you can sign up in the back. May you and your vitality have an incredibly vital evening together. I'll see you next week.